Weirding Way Media. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, where sometimes we have to take a deep breath and remind ourselves how far we have come, and that moving forward is not always a straight path. So deep breath, everyone, and remember, joy is revolutionary. So here are your joyful resistors, Susan+lambert+hatem and Sharon+Johnson.
Hello, I'm Sharon.
And I'm Susan. We have a wonderful show for you today, bringing on a writer, producer, professor, and an incredible 80s TV lady, Miss Georgia Jeffries.
Miss Jeffries is a writer of Emmy Award-winning dramas and has been honored with multiple Writers Guild Awards, Golden Globes, and the Humanitas Prize. She worked as a journalist for American Film before writing and producing some of the most iconic 80s and 90s TV lady shows, Cagney and Lacey, China Beach, and Sisters.
She is also an accomplished short story writer, journalist, and novelist, as well as a professor at the USC School of Cinematic Arts for 18 years. She's awesome. We are so excited to welcome you to 80s TV Ladies, Miss Georgia Jeffries.
Thank you so much. I am definitely an 80s TV lady, so this is the place for me to be today.
And it really is a pleasure to have you here in studio with us. It's always our preferred way, so the fact that you're able to be here is just such a treat.
It's a treat for me. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Susan.
I'm super curious, when you were growing up, did you watch a lot of television? Was television a big part of your life?
I would say TV was a big part of my life. I would say my favorite show was, it was The Twilight Zone.
Oh.
Yeah. And I found a lot of the shows, a lot of sitcoms that I remember watching that didn't interest me at all. And I have to say, a lot of the women characters or little girl characters I saw, and there weren't that many, I thought they were pretty boring. I liked The Twilight Zone because it was very unpredictable. There were like ordinary people and ordinary situations, and suddenly everything became extraordinary and fascinating and sometimes terrifying. And every week it was a different story. And so there's a lot of novelty to it. And that intrigued me. And no continuing characters. And I was raised in the Midwest until I was 13, and my parents moved to California. They also had a classic TV station there, and every Sunday afternoon, I'd be on my tummy on the floor looking up at the TV, watching these classic films, and a lot of Shirley Temple stuff, when I was very young, all those films. And then I started to watch more mysteries and adaptations of classics. And I was always an avid reader. I had no brothers or sisters. I was an only child. So my playmates were books and some of these old films that I was watching. Then there was one movie that I saw on this old TV channel called The Barefoot Contessa, starring Ava Gardner.
Yes.
With Humphrey Bogart. It actually was a kind of mystery because it opened at a funeral, and what happened before this moment, because clearly it was a tragedy. When I watched that film, the main character played by Ava Gardner was definitely a wild woman, a bad girl, rebelling against things that society told her she could not and should not do. And I was very intrigued.
Very captivated.
Very captivated.
Were you a bad girl?
I was a very, very good girl.
Yes.
So that's why I was so captivated. I was an only child. I was an only grandchild on my maternal side. So I really dotted my I's and crossed my T's and did my best to not create any trouble for my parents or my family, because that was important to them at the time.
High expectations for you?
I think they did have high expectations, but it was not so much about succeeding in the world. It was about, I guess, being a good girl and honoring the family. Just honoring the family, because both sides of my parents' families had dealt with quite a bit of tragedy in their parents' and grandparents' lives. And so, I guess I was the hope of the next generation.
Yeah, so your behavior was very important.
Oh, yes.
Behavior was very important.
Yes, one of my father's greatest tributes to me was that I never caused them any trouble. So, yes, I knew the rules.
Like at what point did you decide you wanted to become a writer?
Wow, that's a great question. It wasn't a light bulb going on, I want to be a writer. It was that I did well I loved school. Actually recess was my toughest class because I didn't have any siblings. I had one very close friend who I really consider a brother, a little boy. We lived a block apart. We were both only children, and we were each other's best friends. So I just did my best in school because I loved everything about school. I loved my teachers. I did very well in my classes, and particularly in essays and stories. I remember I did some assignment in high school. It was a short story assignment. I'd never written a short story before. And I remember the criticism was the teacher told me it was too dramatic. Too dramatic, because I dealt with the subject of an atom bomb being dropped, another one in the Third World War, and all of that, and that was not proper material for a short story,
for a young lady.
Yes, no, it wasn't. But yeah, so I would say probably the idea of earning money as a writer didn't really come to me until my senior year at UCLA. I took a number of journalism classes. I was a history major. Always loved history. In fact, that's a lot of my reading as a child, was reading biographies of American heroes and heroines. I preferred the historical books versus, I never read a Nancy Drew mystery in my life. I figure that life itself is a mystery, and you never know what's around the next corner. So that's what intrigued me, that, wow, these people really lived and they really survived through all of these obstacles. I had won an award in high school for my writing, but it was the last year of UCLA. I was taking a lot of graduate classes then because I'd fulfilled my earlier requirements. And I took a great class with Robert Kirsch, who was a book reviewer for the LA Times, and I had to keep a creative writing journal and observe everything that was going around me and all the specifics, and it helped me to be in real time. I think that's when I first developed my love for using imagery and cinematic settings. And then I also took some classes in PR. And my first job, actually, out of college was writing copy for a CBS TV station, KPIX, in San Francisco. And I wrote the continuity, the audio continuity at the time. And you had to say something really bright and catchy to keep people staying with us.
Tuned in. Yeah.
Tuned in, right. Staying on the station, right. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow.
Up until then, were you thinking that you'd be a teacher or...
Isn't this interesting? I never wanted to be a teacher and until decades later. And then after my career in television bloomed, and I was invited to sit on a lot of panels and do some presentations at universities. And I thought, wow, it would be really interesting to maybe teach some classes at university. And then ultimately I became a professor there. No, I didn't. I wanted to do something more adventurous. And early on in college, I was pretty sure I was going to go in the Foreign Service and save the world. But that didn't unfold that way. But I took a lot of language the first couple of years. So my career as a screenwriter, so unplanned, so evolutionary. It was just like one link in a chain was another link and one on that. And I did a podcast a short time ago, and the person who interviewed me would just assume that I came to LA from Peoria, Illinois to break into the business.
Yeah.
No, I was in the backseat of my parents' family car on Route 66, and we ended up in San Francisco Bay Area. And then I did arrive in LA, but to go to UCLA.
then you ended up doing sort of entertainment journalism, which I've also done.
I ended up back in LA. I was married at that point. I married early. We had to start our family early. Welcome to adulthood, ready or not. And I was doing a lot of caretaking early in my life because my mother died shortly before I graduated from college. And my father was kind of in ill health at the time. And that kind of evolved more so with the years. And my mother's mother also, I was taking care of her after she moved to California because my mother had been her only child, right? So there was a lot of caretaking involved. And my career essentially was part-time at home for the first 5 years. So what could I do at home and bring in some money to help pay the rent and then the mortgage? I decided to become a freelance writer because I knew how to write, right? And my first article was for Los Angeles Magazine. And they gave me some nice little assignments. And one of the assignments that I pitched to them that ultimately served me very, very well in my television career a couple years down the road was I wanted to do an interview with some of the new women officers at the LAPD. It was then called isn't this quaint, the unisex program.
The unisex program of the LAPD.
Yes.
What year was this?
Oh my gosh. This was probably, was this 79? Probably. Yeah. One of our children was I remember she was like 5 months at the time. And so I showed up to do my interviews with the women officers. And what a surprise, none of them were available. So instead, I was assigned to go out on an all-night patrol with a young sergeant, and he was assigned to the Rampart Division. And I said, well, I need to tape him. I have my recorder. How quaint also, right? Well, okay, if he agrees to that, you can. But just, sorry, no women are available right now, so goodbye. So that ended up being a really pivotal night in my life. This officer and I bonded over being parents. He's probably 10 years older than I was. He had 3 children. And he got a call in downtown LA to respond to a shooting in an apartment house. And he was going to leave me in the car. And I said, I really need to go with you because I have this assignment. So, well, okay. So I followed him up an apartment building. And sadly, there was a young man who was bleeding on the higher level, the second floor outside the landing. He went in to investigate the shooting. There was another shot while we were up there. We went down to the car. He's leading me down to the car. And there was a bullet hole in the door of the passenger side where I would have been sitting. I don't know if that bullet went in the car. I don't know. But there was a bullet hole in it. We then went on a hot chase pursuit. Apparently, the assailants were also involved in this. All I knew then had to do with drugs. There were a group of cars that were going to the edge of the Inglewood Cemetery. And then at that point, he wouldn't let me out of the car. So he told me to lay in the back seat of the car on the floor. And that's where I laid until things were a little resolved. And then we got back to headquarters in Rampart Division, probably about, I don't know, he had to fill out the report 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And I'll never forget driving home we lived in Woodland Hills at the time, back to the valley, quite a different place than Ramparts. And gave my 4-month-old daughter a kiss as she lay in her bassinet and was very happy to be back there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it gave me a real eye into what some people do to make a living and how we can make certain assumptions and judgments through our own ignorance of what they face every day. Because believe me, I approached the interview with a certain attitude, not just because of my progressive politics, and my feminism, but because I thought I knew what was required of the job. Had no idea, really. Yeah. I had an intellectual hint of what was required. But what that night offered me was a visceral experience. So flash forward to when I pitched my first 5 ideas to Cagney and Lacey and the hope that I would get an assignment. The first 4 were rejected. The last one was about a journalist going on patrol and then having, I said, her eyes open to what was required. And Terry Lewis Fisher, who was the producer who was interviewing me at the time, thanks to Barney's setting up this meeting, said, I think that could be really interesting, but let's do a male journalist and let's have Cagney be the cop who is under the eye of the media judgment. And so that was just the bare seed that planted Unusual Occurrence.
Yeah.
It was called an Unusual Occurrence. That was my first television series episode. It was my first produced television, and it won a Writers Guild Award.
Yeah.
Suddenly it happened. It happened. All, the years of wondering, what next, right?
Wow. You do a lot of that in that you take something from your life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then put it into story form, fictionalize it. I love that. I think that's really neat. I think that's some of the best TV writing that we get is when it's really got a personal in, but then can become universal.
Thank you. I consider that high praise. Thank you. Yeah.
Now, did you grow up, did you consider yourself a feminist in the 70s and 80s? It sounds like you did.
Oh, yes. Oh, heck yes. Oh, absolutely.
And where did
to tell you the truth, I don't know when I haven't been a feminist because I can remember in class being outraged, if I felt the boys were getting more attention or whatever. And believe it or not, I went back to an 8th grade reunion once upon a time back in the Midwest. And I remember one of the boys who was there, who was now a very grown-up man and had a pretty hard life himself. But he said, yeah, I remember you. You were the one that used to argue with the teachers. And I said, I never argued with the teachers. I love the teachers. I did ask a lot of questions because I wanted to know more, and I guess in that sense, I have to, even though certain behavioral rules were expected in my household, I was always encouraged to speak up, especially by my mother. Especially by my mother. And my dad used to call me a tomboy because he got me a pony, and I love to roller skate and ride a pony and get bucked off and all that stuff. So, he was sweet that way. I said, did you really want a boy, Dad? And he said, well, I got a tomboy, so it works out. Yeah. I mean, I was excited about moving to California. I'd seen the Mickey Mouse Club. Wow. Wow. This is where they do the Mickey Mouse Club, right? So that was exciting. And my mother was very excited about moving as well. We pretty much moved from my dad's work. He was going through a difficult time. And so he was not as excited. So it was a transition. Yeah. And it was a transition. I'll just say that.
All right. So how did you get started in television movies? The transition from journalism?
I just queried every magazine I could think of to try to get an assignment. I was...
And this is the days of typewriters. Right?
Yes. My electric typewriter, my baby, I loved it. And so just wherever I thought I could bring in, $150 here or there. And so I read about American Film Magazine and queried them. And very surprisingly, I think considering my few credits at the time, I was hired as a contributor. I was interviewing filmmakers whose work I did not even know. I'm thinking of Paul Mazursky. So it was a real learning curve for me. I was so excited when I interviewed Joan Tewksbury. Remember her? Wrote Nashville.
Yeah.
So exciting. One of the few women directors at the time, and she was so gracious. Frank Oz, I visited the set of The Muppets.
Nice.
And that was thrilling to my two little ones.
And how old are your kids about this time?
Oh, gosh. I guess they've moved into nursery school. Let's see, Bridget was probably kindergarten, and Patrick still in nursery school. Yeah. And so, and Frank Oz actually came into my life again very briefly about probably at least a dozen years later when I was writing a feature script for Universal. There were two production companies behind it, Cher's company, Isis, and Jessica Lange's company. They were both at Universal at the time, and they wanted to do something together. So this was post Cagney and Lacey, and so they asked me to pitch. I pitched, and I did two drafts of what I'd pitched, and got paid well for it. Never got made, but Frank Oz committed as a director to it. And I thought, oh, how exciting, right? Full circle. Cher's company was very happy with the script. Jessica Lange's company, I think, wanted more for her role.
So was this for a movie or for a TV show?
A movie.
A movie with Cher and Jessica Lange.
Yeah, never got made.
Directed by Frank Oz. What was it called?
And it was called Confessions. And it was set in the 50s. They wanted, that was a log line. Two women in the 50s.
That was the log line.
Two women in the 50s.
Okay.
Give us a story. Give us a story. And so I made Cher a writer of True Confessions magazines, which of course she was doing secretly because they were supposed to both be good housewives. Except one of them wasn't such a good housewife. She was carrying on an affair, the Jessica Lange character. I had a lot of fun writing it. And it's like it was almost going to get made because Jessica's company wanted another rewrite on it with another writer. Guess who came in to do that rewrite? Anne Spielberg.
Oh.
And my agent at the time said, Georgia, it's going to get made. It's going to be a lighter touch. Yours was a little bit more serious, kind of a dark comedy. They wanted a little bit lighter still. It's going to get made because Anne Spielberg is doing the next draft. But it didn't get made. No. And their deals ended.
Yeah. 1,000 of those stories in the Naked City.
What a surprise, right? There weren't a lot of female buddy pictures at the time, but that was one of the ideas behind the two of them coming together, right?
I would... Cher and Jessica Lange. That's what I want.
Right? Two great actresses.
I never would have put them together in a movie. So yeah, that's very intriguing.
So maybe it worked out just fine that it didn't happen. Who knows?
No, but it's very intriguing. I mean, like you, I would love to see that, whatever it is.
I think this was right after Cher got her Oscar. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is wonderful. But I deviated because you asked me about movies of the week. And at the time, I was very intrigued with movies of the week because they were considered the platinum storytelling of television in the sense of taking on important issues. And I remember I saw the miniseries that Sally Field had starred in called Sybil. That dealt with some very just powerful writing, directing, acting on her part. I mean, it's really what created her serious career, right? Dealing with a lot of mental health issues, which has always been an interest of mine as well. I thought, maybe I could do something that would help people. I want to write something that would inspire people. I did have these idealistic intentions, and I still do. By the way, I own up to it. But I just never anticipated that where I would really be able to explore those interpersonal and social issues would be on a television series. Okay, and so now I'm going to share something with you. I probably shared with Barney a long time ago, but I'm sure he doesn't remember it. I had never seen Cagney and Lacey before I got the invitation to come and pitch for it. I had never watched the show. You asked me what shows did I watch in the 70s? I had no time to watch shows because I was finishing college and then I was doing a lot of caretaking and then trying to get magazine assignments to help pay the mortgage on. I'd been able to buy our first little house then. And so I had heard of it, certainly, but also it had been canceled several times. Right? Mm-hmm. However, this is why the importance of being generous in one's life and doing a good deed when you can. And I always share this. I've always shared this with the students I've taught. So I was, and there's a connection to this too, right? women's organizations have supported me from day one in my life. And so right after I graduated from college, I became a member of the American Association of University Women. And then after that, Women in Film. And then active in the Writers Guild and the Women's Committee and the Ageism Committee when I was 37 years old. And I walked in and people said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I hope to live long enough to qualify with this, right?" Certainly I have. So because of that support of Women in Film, and I had the opportunity to become really active in it very early, and I was on one of the boards, and I produced an award show called Crystal Awards. And I think it was probably my third treatment that had been optioned at the time by an entertainment company, and I had invited several of those executives to one of the lunches to help support the organization. And a producer named Phil Farrelly, who called me and said, "Georgia, I just met with a wonderful woman, Nikki Marvin, who was a producer at the BBC in London, and she's just moved to LA, and I maybe you can help her with some contacts through Women in Film." So we had lunch, and I gave her 3 suggestions, and I don't know whatever happened with that, but she ended up being Barney Rosenzweig's executive assistant. She called me, and she said, "Georgia, he needs to read your work." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Have your agent send him." And I knew there was only one script to send at that point, and that was Nobody's Fool. That was my first feature that I had written on assignment, and that's the one that won the Film Festival Award. And I'd gotten a lot of attention for it, opened a lot of doors through the years. It's a story of a young MP, military police officer stationed in Okinawa, who was fighting sexual harassment on base.
And this is 1984.
Okay. 84, yeah. And I had a very small agent. Yes, he was short now that I think about it. But it was a very small agency.
This was the time also of a boutique agency.
Yes,
there was a lot of boutique agencies.
Yes. And that was definitely very boutique. So I asked Jeff to send the script. And Nikki called like a month later, "Georgia hasn't arrived yet," because she was seeing all the scripts coming in. And I said, "Okay." I don't know why I asked him to. So I called again. And she called a second time. This was over a period. It started in January. And in May, my agent receives a call from Barney Rosenzweig. He's read my script on the way back from New York, and he wants me to come in and pitch for the show. And so I give full credit to Lisa Seidman, who was the aspiring screenwriter who took Nikki Marvin's place. There was a lot of credit to go around. Nikki and Lisa ultimately saw my script on the slush pile. Nobody had read it. She read it. She recommended it to Barney. And then Barney read it. And the way it was presented to me was he knew I could write Cagney's. He wanted to bring in a writer that he felt could really capture Cagney's voice. And you probably remember at this time, Tyne had already won at least her first Emmy. And Sharon needed her turn.
Yeah. They needed to start trading those Emmys back and forth, keeping everybody locked out for a few years.
Both wonderful actresses. And it was such a joy. I think I mentioned, fortunately I brought in 5 ideas and not 4.
Yes, it was the 5th.
And I got to the 5th, and Terry Lewis Fisher said, "Yeah, let's. I think we can do that," because Barney had set up the meeting with Terry, and then that script was well received.
You hadn't watched the show.
Oh, I'll tell you, I did watch.
Okay,
I did watch it 2 weeks before, because Lisa Seidman, even though Nikki had left the show with creative differences with Barney, right? Lisa and she were good friends, and they came out to visit me and said, "We want to tell you about the show, and the reruns are on now, so you should take a look next week. You've got 2 weeks before you got to go in." And they kind of gave me the lay of the land in terms of the series, how it had been canceled twice. This was, the last hurrah. CBS had given them a full order, which for the first time. So it was a great opportunity. But I'd never pitched for series before. I'd never written for series before. But I had written tough women.
Yes. So did anything ever happen with the MP sexual harassment movie?
Well, that's so interesting. No, it never got produced, won that Film Festival Award, but it never got produced. However, that was the script that was read by Carrie Putnam at HBO when I received the call. This was the log line I got from them. A female breaker Morant. Now, this would have been in probably 1995, maybe 96, 97. I don't know if you know the Australian film Breaker Morant.
I know of it. I don't know it.
I had heard of it, but I'd never seen it, so I did watch that one right away. It's a story of a young Australian soldier who was scapegoated during the Boer War in South Africa and ultimately shot by his soldier comrades because they were losing the war and somebody had to take blame for it. So what HBO wanted me to do was they wanted me to imagine a time when women would be able to serve in the military in the United States. Flash forward. I could imagine that. And they're involved in some kind of unpopular conflict.
We can imagine that too.
We could imagine that over and over again. And she's brought up on charges in some way. She's scapegoated. That's all they gave me. And so originally I was going to set it in the Middle East. And then with some other conversations, we decided to set it in Mexico. Because that was shortly after the Chiapas uprising, Mexico.
Wow.
And so that actually got greenlit to production. Meg Ryan was going to be one of the stars in it. And then the executive was relieved of his duties at HBO. They were wonderful executives to work with and went on to other opportunities. And it fell into purgatory. It just fell into development purgatory. But then flash forward 2017, I had the rights back. And I decided I wanted to write it as a book and then turn it into a limited series. So I made that pitch to a company called Adaptive Studios, which at the time was doing Project Green Light. And they also were doing something very novel at the time. This was about 10 years ago. They were buying developed scripts that had not been produced to turn into hardcover books as IP. And yeah, you got it. So they'd had success with a book written by Ryan Gaddis. So I'd already worked for Adaptive Studios as a consultant to a podcast they were doing called False Idols. So I did my treatment, I made my pitch, and they hired me to write the book. And so the real origin of that book, called Lange, was that HBO script. And it was supposed to be published in December 2021. And then Adaptive Books and Studios dissolved post-lockdown and was bought by Mad River, another feature company. So
you have had a very Hollywood career.
So a very Hollywood career, and
so close,
so close. And it only took 3 years for me to get the rights back. You bet, you bet. And I kind of still hope to get at least the book published because it would make a heck of a film. Yeah. And it's another woman's story that needs to be told.
Getting the rights back, what does that entail? And obviously there's some legalities involved. But...
Tremendous perseverance. At the time, fortunately for me, I was still represented by an attorney that worked for me on a percentage basis. That was very helpful. He's now retired, but I very much appreciate the assistance at the time because it helped me to get the rights back, which was a little challenging.
Yeah.
The movie the week I did that it aired as a terrible title, My Husband's Secret Life, but it was originally based on a novel called Tin Wife. I'd written that adaptation actually when I was still working at Cagney Lacey. Terry Fisher had been approached to write the screenplay. She was too busy. She handed it off to me. So I was working out on weekends. I'd be writing the script on weekends and then doing the series during the week.
And now, how old were your kids when you were on Cagney and Lacey? And how was that?
Well, our son, I think by the last year, our son had turned 8. And because he was so young, the long production hours, I think, were particularly hard on him. Yeah. I think our daughter was more thrilled with the idea of seeing her mom's name, with these 2 glamorous actresses on the show. That's why, actually, I was able to write Lacey's character as well as I did, because every working mother can identify with it. You just, there's a day that goes by that you don't feel guilty.
Yeah.
I don't know it.
You were quoted once as saying that Tyne Daly would call up and say, I need a mother speech.
She did, yes. I was very honored that she did that. I can remember she'd call the office, or one of the other producers would come in, and it's not that there weren't other mothers on the show. Shelley List, and of course Barbara Corday and Barbara Avedon, whom I never met, but they had co-created the show. But their children were adult at that point. Yeah. I was the one still in the trenches.
Yeah, and so there were a lot of women on Cagney Lacey, unusual for the time.
Happily.
How was that? And how did it differ from other places you went into?
Well, in a sense, I was really, really very fortunate that was my debut in the writing room, because it was usually half and half. Terry was there. It was huge that Terry was there. Yeah. She had a male partner, Steve Brown, who was a West Point grad, and that shares a lot, I think, about his personality, too. So he was very, very focused on structure and also gifted in that. Terry was more focused on characterization, and so they worked well together as a partnership. Pat Green and I worked well, especially together on doing rewrites. There was a wonderful episode called The Gimp, if you recall that.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful idea, and it was brought in by the partner of a friend of mine whom we invited to pitch. Barney was happy with the story, but not happy with the script. So Pat and I pretty much rewrote that. But the great thing about Cagney and Lacey, and there were many great things about it, but all of the writing staff that did the rewriting, we didn't take the credit for every single story that was rewritten. But that was what was different from a number of other shows. I'm not sure about St. Elsewhere, but certainly on all of Bochco's shows. I mean, you'll probably remember seeing the Emmy Awards at that time, the Emmy shows, and whenever Hill Street Blues won an award, as they did often, Bochco was always up there accepting getting another Emmy for having co-created the story. And when I was invited to go on to LA Law after Terry left, before I decided instead to go to China Beach, I'd gotten both offers. Bochco is a very talented writer, and had an interview with him, and I said, well, tell me about the logistics of the show and how they work. Well, the story was broken in a room with him leading it, and then parts of the story were handed out to the writing staff. So one person would be writing the A line, one would be writing the B, C, D, right? Mm-hmm. But at no point was the originating writer doing the first, second, possibly even third by himself or herself. Also, the majority of his writers were male until he and Terry Louis Fisher started working together on Hooperman. And then, of course, they co-created LA Law, and both of them working together. Wonderful, right? It was brilliant. But as Terry said at the time, she said, it's a good time, Georgia, to be breaking into series television because there are more women being hired now, obviously, than ever before, more progressive themes being dealt with. She said, in fact, this is Terry's sense of humor. She says, it's almost fashionable to be working with a woman now because it shows how progressive,
Yes,
that the particular male showrunner is. She was absolutely right. So timing was very important when I broke into series television. I mean, if it had been 10 years before, there wouldn't even have been a series drama that was co-written by two women.
Yeah.
Or one woman.
Here are some pretty amazing episodes of Cagney and Lacey. Which are your favorites of the
ones that I wrote?
That you wrote, yeah.
Well, I'll always love An Unusual Occurrence,
yes,
because of its history, its personal history to me, and also because I felt it was a very important subject.
Yeah,
a very, very important subject. Let's show the other side of assumptions and judgments and the prejudice that each of us carry with us in different ways, right? Turn, part one. Very personal. Very personal.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. What a tour de force on all parts, but particularly from Sharon Glass.
Oh, yes.
But particularly from the writing, to write scenes like that.
Thank you.
Really stunning.
It was really such a wonderful opportunity to be able to write that story because it had been simmering with me for a while, probably from the first season I was on the show, because pretty early on you see the lay of the land. Her dad is alcoholic. Mm-hmm. She's walking in his footsteps, certainly trying to please him. She's had this elite education, but she's basically a rebel, and she's challenging the system every way she can. She's recklessly ambitious, actually, at different times. And also, what was so funny, I love to write scenes where she could be funny.
Yeah,
because she was so vain. The time Lacey was so serious. Serious mother and taking care of everybody. I could write those scenes half asleep. Cagney, I could really channel a lot of other feelings into that character. A
lot of that dark feeling.
Oh yeah, and it mirrored women's culturally, politically, personally, the existence of both of these complex, multidimensional women mirrored so many women's lives. They were everything to everybody in their family, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they still wanted to follow their own dreams. And of course, above all, they had to help pay the mortgage. It started then.
Yeah.
Where was I yesterday? Oh, I know. Have you ever heard of the Jonathan Club in downtown LA?
Jonathan Club?
Yeah, It's an exclusive men's social club. And we were taking an LA Conservancy tour there yesterday, and I was doing also some research for a short story I'm working on. And I learned that they accepted women as full members in 1987. For years they had some restrictive rules in terms of religion, color, sex, everything. And apparently accepting women was the last door to be pushed open. And it was 1987. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense to me because so much was going on culturally in our country at that time. And I remember serving on some panels and the question would be, well, yes, we have Title IX and so on. So what's, and when I was interviewed for some of the TV's second golden age, what came first? The political change, the cultural change, the person, it all kind of happened simultaneously and each one informed the other. So in that sense, very grateful that I came of age professionally in that time. Very grateful.
You were on Advanced TV Herstory. You said it was obvious the zeitgeist was influencing us, and we were influencing the zeitgeist.
I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for reminding me what I said.
It was wonderful. I was like, I'm writing that one down.
That's more succinct, and I like it. Less is more. One of the big lessons I learned in writing at Cagney and Lacey in dialogue. Yeah,
but such an interesting time, and was that being reflected? Like, so Turn was a big one for you.
Yeah.
Because it was also personal?
Yes, and also it took on an issue that really I hadn't seen it discussed that much on television at that point, which was the issue of addiction, alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, now it's commonplace. Oh, it was fun doing the, was it Rite of Passage? That was an episode where Lacey talked to her son about, oh, son, I love you so much. Good idea to use a condom and protect yourself. And oh, by the way, your family as well, right? And again, it sounds quaint now, but that was a very big deal in I believe it was 1987 or the end of 86. In fact, Barney and I were interviewed about that episode on Entertainment Tonight because condom, the word, had never been used on television before.
It had not been used on television before?
Another first for Cagney Lacey.
That's amazing. AIDS is starting to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That's probably why they were able to use the word, because up until then, it wasn't something that could save your life, really.
That's right. That's right.
But when was Designing... Because Designing Women was the same year, but I don't know that Designing Women...
They broke a lot of boundaries, too, which is challenging even more in a certain way because it was a comedy.
Yeah.
Right? So they were very brave. There was a lot of bravery going on at that period of time. And also, I will say, I guess, some rebelliousness going on. Let's name it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's name it. Most of us working at that time, we all grew up with 50s, 60s, early 70s television. I know Cynthia discovered that, what was the Marlo Thomas show?
That
girl. Apparently, she had addressed certain issues. I never saw that show, right? But there were little glimmers of people, very progressive thinkers and actors and creators who wanted to reflect more what was going on in our zeitgeist. Yeah.
That's been one of the interesting things about rewatching a lot of the shows that we've watched. Every now and then something will pop up and you'll go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're talking about it.
I mean, the second influence on my moving into screenwriting was my father-in-law. My father-in-law was a very pragmatic man, and he had a neighbor who was a screenwriter. And he said, George, I think you could probably make more money in screenwriting than you could as a magazine writer. And that was the impetus for my taking my first UCLA extension class in formatting, screenplay formatting. And I did get one meeting with his neighbor. It lasted for about 35 minutes. He was a polite guy. And then he'd done due diligence, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
But hey, the idea sounded intriguing to me, and I was doing the interviews with American Film at the time. So it was the juxtaposition, timing.
Yeah.
That opens our minds to new possibilities.
Well, and I also think, again, it is seeing where there's an opening.
Always.
You had that eye, not really on the prize, but on the next move.
I did. Was kind of had my eye on the next move for a couple reasons. One, very pragmatic by nature, and it was important that we be a two-income family. But also, I guess, as far back as I can remember, I think I always wanted to make my mark in some way. I just never knew how I would be doing it, how and when that might unfold. The universe brings things into our path, and we say yay or nay. And as I've said to many of my classes, I've said, say yes, as if, except if you know that some offer is going to violate your values. And your gut instinct is telling you you're moving into dangerous territory. Then you say no. And I remember hearing an NPR interview with Tim Robbins. Yeah. And it always stayed with me. And he said, one of the most important words you can say in Hollywood is no. You just have to know when to say it and who to say it to.
Yeah.
And that comes, I think, with maturity and experience.
Well, and knowing your values.
Yeah.
Values and listen to your gut instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things we discuss in my classes is that it requires a certain level of hubris just to write, to put anything on the page, to assume that you have something to offer, that someone will want to read this someday. Because, yeah, I've done journaling off and on, but I think I've always thought about sharing my writing. Right? I always wanted readers for my writing or audience or whatever. Although with the passing years, the most important thing is just I'm the audience. And the joy, you asked about joy. Where's the joy? The joy is in the storytelling and getting it on the page and creating a scene that's fun to be in, where you get to play all the characters, all the voices. I love to act on the page with the characters. And so you have to have at least, people who want the work seen and experienced by other people. If you want that co-creating with readers, right? You have to have a certain sense of hubris that it's worth looking at. And you have to have a great humility, knowing that you're going to receive hundreds, if not thousands, of rejections through the years, even when you're succeeding. And you're getting wonderful opportunities. As you said, it's all these almost, right? You're being paid. So, supporting you. But, I wrote dozens of pilots and they each creating a world. And the files that were this thick of the storylines that I had first, second season. When you work in a writer's room, showrunner, you think in terms of seasons and years. And then when it wasn't picked up, there's a little bit of a heartbreak in letting go of it.
So I'm curious, of the pilots that you developed that didn't go, which ones are the most heartbreaking, or that's the one that I'll never forgive them for not putting on the air?
Well, the very first pitch I did for my own pilot was for a series set in China Beach, believe it or not. And that was about 18 months before China Beach happened at ABC. And I made that pitch to CBS with a Movie of the Week production company that wanted to be in the series business. And I did that the summer after my first season at Cagney Lacey. And at the time, CBS says, nobody wants to see a series about Vietnam. So instead, they gave me an order for a pilot about two women who were young medical residents in Walter Reed Army Hospital. It was called Ramsey. Right. I've had the opportunity and the gift of being able to do a lot of research in some very, very interesting places. And I was at Walter Reed for a week doing a lot of the interviewing. So that wasn't picked up, but then was it 2 or 3 years later, I was invited to go on to China Beach. I was just leaving Cagney Lacey at the time, but I was in business with Barney contractually with the Rosenzweig Company. He had his own business for 2 years. And so we set up at Sunset Gower. He wanted to develop new series, right? Was looking also for shows for Sharon at the time, right? But then he received the offer to go to Weintraub Productions. Then I received the second offer to go to China Beach.
What was exciting about China Beach for you?
Bigger canvas. Of course, we dealt with social issues in a very, I think, exciting, inventive way in Cagney and Lacey. But China Beach is an era that I'd lived through. Could never forget the documented war coverage that we grew up watching on television. It was also a different kind of show in the sense that it had a much bigger budget.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers, much bigger budget. Other than a few exteriors being done in New York once every several years for Cagney and Lacey, China Beach, we had the exteriors up in Santa Clarita. We had all the sets on the Warner Brothers stage.
Yeah, it's a very epic show.
Yes.
The music budget alone.
Right, which is why it took so long, to get out on TV and love the music. But also, the dialogue was much, the two creators, Bill Broyles, who was a lieutenant in Vietnam, and John Young, it had a different approach in the sense that it was, the stories were often more metaphorical than as specific and on the nose as some of the issues were in Cagney and Lacey. So in a sense, this may sound odd, but you could be a little bit more poetic with some of the writing and take chances in new areas. And so in How to Stay Alive in Vietnam Part 1, I had seen a one-man show starring Troy Evans, who was a character on the show, was speaking about his own experience in Vietnam and the tragedy that I do depict in the voiceover with him. And being able to use the director was Fred Gerber, who was also the line producer for the show, being able to go from first person, breaking the fourth wall, to the camera, and then to documenting what was going on out in the field. That was another thing. I wanted to do more out in the field. That was not always well received, actually, on the show, because they wanted to stay more in the hospital bay and focus entirely on McMurphy, although Casey was one of my favorite characters on the show, and also one of my favorite actresses to work with. You asked about that, Marg Helgenberg.
Yeah.
I just thought she just brought a real edge to it. So I was, I had the opportunity to spread my wings more. And pretty much did the same thing that I did on Cagney Lacey as a producer. I mean, it was always in the editing bay. It was always breaking story in the writing room, in the circle. John Wells and I were the co-supervising producers at the time. But I will say that there was more of a male ethos on that show.
Yeah.
And I would say that because of the creator.
Well, other than you, how many other female writers were there on the show?
There were two other women writers, but it was usually the majority was just a little bit more edge to the male writers. And of course, Barney was never a writer.
Yeah.
I think until the last episode that he wrote for the show, he was an outstanding producer. But John Young's outstanding writer, and good director. He wasn't interested in being in the writing room. He was never in the writing room. When we broke story, it was John Wells and I and the story editors. So it was a much different ambiance. Much different ambiance. And I will say, at least from my experience, I thought that there was more of an esprit de corps on Cagney and Lacey with the co-writers I worked on there. But, so much is personality oriented depending on the show and the casting. It's not just casting on the screen; it's casting in the room. In the room, yeah. So it was a different experience, and I was doing pretty much at least a couple pilots a year at that point, and so I decided I just wanted to move on and do more pilots, and then I had thankfully I had a very, very nice deal to develop pilots at MGM TV for several years. Yeah.
Had any of your pilots gone to series, I would imagine you'd given some thought to what kind of showrunner you wanted to be and what kind of writer's room you wanted to run.
Oh, Sharon, so interesting you asked that question, because for years I kept a list of the writers that I wanted to bring on the show. And Tony Graffia is one, Joseph Anderson, whom I'd worked with on Cagney and Lacey, and also I brought him on as story editor at China Beach. All very humanistically oriented, all team players, excellent writers, less ego, more imagination. That's what I wanted to bring if I had ever had that opportunity, right? But in terms of the personal pilots, Vista Clara I did for a production company called Kushner Locke. Vista Clara dealt with a lot of magical realism. And yes, it had the trope of the main character was an attorney, but she moved to Santa Fe, and this was probably 5 or 6 years before 6 Feet Under. She, in the show, had a relationship with her dead mother. So on one hand, yes, there was a legal case every week, but also there was this relationship between an older woman, a younger woman, and all based in areas of magical realism and what is real and what is not real. So I was creating some new ground with that pilot. And we had Leah Thompson committed to the show. She was a name at the time. Her husband was going to direct it. And NBC didn't order it. And I said, tell me, what did I miss?
Yeah.
What did I need to do? And he said, well, Georgia, I think we went as far as we could with it. But, there were no shows with female protagonists ordered for this season with lead female protagonists. And so the doors can really go wide open. And then there's a different executive regime. And then they close a little bit. And then they open again. Again, timing. Timing has served me very well in aspects of my career. And then timing, the way I look at timing at this point in my life is, where's the divine order here? Okay, what else should I be experiencing? I'm looking straight ahead. Maybe I need to look in new directions and know that I'm being called to do something else at this point. And shortly after that, the opportunity opened at USC. It was more than an opportunity. I mean, in a sense, it was a new family. And I'm not talking about being sentimental. They talk a lot about the Trojan family, right? But I mean, in the sense that the community of faculty and students. I just felt it was a great opportunity to inspire new writers and also to share some of I use the L word, lessons that I'd learned in my career and that you keep learning. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And what would be every year is a new decade, but what would be your advice for emerging writers?
Be very, very innovative and trust your gut instinct because everything is moving so very, very quickly now. Please resist AI every way you can and be original, even more original, and know that your guild is not always going to be able to protect you. And more than ever, be willing to cross different lines of the concentric levels of storytelling. And that means in terms of distribution, as well as creativity. So many students now are posting it on YouTube. That's how they're getting attention. Right.
All right. And so you wrote an essay about breaking in to TV. Do you remember the first time?
The first time they told me I write like a man? Yes. Now, the actual title of the book was The First Time I Got Paid for It. And there was a pulp cover, right, with like a 40s-looking secretary. I was not a big fan of that. But I said, we could say the first time for anything, right? That's what I chose because I did actually have the experience of showing up for a meeting with a development executive who had read Nobody's Fool, which was that first script about the female MP, and it would have been an R-rated film had it ever been made. And I walked into the room, and he was shocked to see a woman in front of him. And he looked at the script, and he said, I thought this was written by Georgia Jeffries. And I said, no, Georgia. It's me. And he actually did say in the meeting, he said, well, you really write like a man. And that was a tribute. I knew what he was saying.
Yeah.
I knew what he was saying. And so I thought, and as I shared that story with my students and women, my women students had a great reaction. I said, I wasn't going to lose that meeting. I was in that meeting. He had to deal with me whether or not I got good feedback on that script. And he saw I was dealing with a woman. So I guess a woman could write a script like that with all those 4-letter words and dealing with sexual harassment and rape and what everything else was going on there. And you could still like that script, mister. And maybe this will open your mind to look at other scripts and not read the first name wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And not throw it away if it says Tiffany, instead of George, right? That's what I wanted to write about.
That's
and I
amazing.
did. But it goes on. The beat goes on. It really does. It just in different ways at different times. And so there's such huge progress, but then there are steps back. And we all know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just ask you a couple questions about Sisters, because it's a very different show from Cagney Lacey and China Beach.
Yeah, very different. Well, I was asked to come on. I was asked to come on as co-EP, and I was working on my first novel at the time, and I didn't feel that I had the time to do that. So I agreed to come on as a consultant, and I ended up breaking a lot of stories there. And the two executive producers, the two male executive producers, were actually big fans of Cagney Lacey. And then I think even though the show's tenor was lighter and almost more soap opera-ish in certain ways, I think they wanted to do their bit to deal with more multidimensional women, right? And so I ended up writing the episode about Sheila Ward's daughter having been a victim of rape. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the main reason, frankly, that they wanted me to be on the show is because they admired certain of the shows that we did on Cagney and Lacey. And I think they wanted to add some gravitas to Sisters in the last couple seasons. And so that was fun for a while. And then I was doing a lot of extra work on Breaking Story, which was really not my responsibility as an executive consultant. I was supposed to be there 3 days a week. I was being paid to be there 3 days a week as opposed to a full week. So I had to kind of step out of that deal. It was very friendly, and they both understood. And the next year they invited me to come back again as co-EP, but I had another pilot deal at that point.
Well, let's talk about your novels for a minute.
Thank you.
The Younger Girl came out last year.
Yes,
a year
at the
ago.
end of 24. I was actually inspired by a trip in the late 90s that I'd taken with my dad back to his hometown in the Midwest in Illinois. And I always knew there was a story there because I had known of the tragedy of his older half-sister being murdered when he was a child. And I learned a lot more when I was back there on that trip. And I felt it was a story that I wanted to write, but I knew I needed to do it as a novel. And I guess I kind of felt I needed to do it for my family. And also because I had seen the Chicago front page headlines that had been saved by my dad's family of this beautiful young woman, 20-year-old heiress killed, married man held, and I wanted to know the story behind it. And very slowly I was able to collect through several trips back to Illinois to do a lot of research in the courthouse, property records, etc., to find out who was not only responsible for her death, but also for the embezzlement of her inheritance that she was supposed to receive when she came of age at the age of 18. So it was a mystery, always for me. It was also, I would say, a kind of a labor of love for my family, and also a cautionary tale, really, because she was only 15 when she was seduced by a married man who was ultimately found responsible for her death. It's historical fiction, it's suspense, and it also has some magical realism.
Based on a true story that happened to your family.
My father came from a blended family. His mother had been married 3 times, widowed twice, divorced 3rd time. My father's father abandoned the family. And so a lot of drama and dysfunction in my father's family, which is always good grist for a storyteller.
Yes.
And I wanted to know more because I knew that had affected my dad deeply in terms of his issues of mental health and depression and addiction. And And I also wanted to know the truth for myself about what really happened with this young woman who lost her voice and her life way too early. And so it really was something that I felt I was called to do. And I did a podcast recently. Actually, I was on a panel, and for the first time, I was thinking of this story more as a tale of two women. Two women in the sense that it opens with the story of a 40-year-old daughter who is trying to help to save her father, who is in ill health, by coming to terms with the murder of his older sister, who had a huge impact on him when he was a child. But I intercut the story between third-person POV of this adult daughter and her father with the teenage diary of the young girl, Aldine Younger, from the age of 12 to 19, just before she turned 20 and was killed. And I've been asked, how did you find the diary? And I said, in my imagination. But it was inspired by a lot of oral history. And it was also very, very freeing to write it first person.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the short stories I'm working on right now is from first person. Very freeing. I'd recommend that to any writer who wants to break into new creative territory. But it is, because truly, Aldine was also trying to find justice for the inheritance that had been embezzled shortly before she was killed. And I think most of all, she wanted freedom. She wanted to get out of that stifling small town that couldn't contain her spirit. And so it's quite a journey writing the story. And it was over a decade that I was writing it, like summer between college teaching, and then also writing the book that was inspired by the HBO screenplay, Lange. So, and then finally I decided, actually after the deal that was dissolved, after the publishing deal was dissolved in late 21, early 22, I said, okay, where's the gift here? I mean, I know, it's another heartbreak, but where's the gift? Time to go back. Right. To that novel and finish it. It's time to finish it.
That's amazing. And because it was so personal, even though it's also like historical, like it's made up, like it's a fiction book, but based on a lot of real stuff. So
Yeah. And the transcripts are taken out of the transcripts. Mm-hmm. The property records that I viewed and I reference, and in which I found that there was some implication in terms of the theft of her inheritance from another family member. That's all out of documentation of the interviews that I did, and the research.
Was it harder or easier to write because it was so personal?
Both. I mean, the toughest part was weaving together all of the research with the visit of the father and daughter, and not just the oral history, but all of the other research I'd done. What was the joyful, and therefore, I would also say the easiest, was writing Aldine. I could come home from teaching a class, go to bed, and wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and go and write a scene that was in one of her personal journals, right? And it just came. And then I could breathe easy and I could get back to bed. And what was interesting about that whole experience is I didn't write any of those diary entries in sequence.
Did it change your relationship with your father?
My father died within, I guess it was 3 months after we returned from Illinois in the late 90s. So
no,
but no, actually, it's a great question. Thank you for asking. Yes, it did change my relationship with my dad. Because it brought more compassion and understanding and acceptance into that relationship. Yes, it did. It did. So what a gift. What a gift to write it. It wasn't just, not just channeling her character, but being able to write about that father-daughter relationship. It's very much a father-daughter story. I write in scenes. And even when I'm writing prose, I create scenes, right? Relationship. People are always in relationship with someone, right? So, and one of the first things I learned on the TV series was you always write about conflict because the truth of any relationship is revealed through conflict and dialogue. Love writing dialogue. I had to learn how to write dialogue well. But once I learned, it just becomes one of the favorite things to do. So both in my prose and also in my film work, I mean, scenes, conflict, dialogue. But the real difference is the exterior versus the interior. So that everything I write in a film script is going to ultimately be expressed by the actor through the eyes, the expression, a turn of the shoulders. I mean, it's endless. You are totally dependent on the actor conveying the deepest sense apart from the words. And in prose, I can step aside from that scene, that external scene, into the interior of the mind. So there was a scene when father and daughter were driving back into Illinois, and I'm in his voice and her voice in their internal mind. Neither one of them knows what the other is thinking. We just know that there's a lot of tension in that car between the two of them. And that was also, I love writing that way. So I would say to you at this point in my life, I love writing prose because I can do it all. I don't need an actor.
Yeah.
I love actors, especially when they bring what they bring to what I give them, what our writing team gives them, right? But it's wonderful to be able to do both. Yeah.
All right. Are you working on a new novel?
Actually, yes. I was doing some edits this week. It's actually it's a reincarnation of this earlier novel that I've taken in all sorts of new directions. It's interesting that it's an 80s story. It's inspired by the LA Mr. Goodbar murder that made headlines up and down the West Coast. So it is a novel, but it is inspired by true incidents. And so there are some real things in the story as well as a lot of fiction. And it's very much about the 80s and Los Angeles, just that cult of longing and yearning for people who especially are on the edge of Hollywood. And then I just got an assignment for a new short story that's called Desert Noir. So, yeah.
Wow. All right.
So more short stories in the future, too.
That's amazing. What an incredible career you've had. I'm so thrilled that you were able to join us and we can sort of continue to complete our Cagney and Lacey journey.
Yay, Cagney and Lacey, the beginning for so many of us in so many ways, right?
Yeah. Really, what a special show. We tend to count who's behind the scenes on those. Cagney and Lacey holds up very well with the number of women writers and directors.
Absolutely. And one of my colleagues at USC, Helene Head, who directed The Clinic, one of her first directing jobs. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sharon Miller, wonderful director as well. At Cagney Lacey. I don't know if you've ever interviewed her, but
we have not, but we'll put her on the list. But I mean, that was such a groundbreaking show in so many ways. It's hard to explain. I remember I remember seeing the cover of Ms. Magazine.
Yes. At
the time and I was pretty young, but it was like, can two women work together? Like it was literally an insane headline that you're like, wait, what? That's the question.
Right. And But women who are just defined in limited points of view, right?
Yeah. All right. Where can people find you?
Oh, GeorgiaJeffries.com.
All right.
Yes, my website for the younger girl, and also some events that are coming up, because I'll be speaking at a writing conference in San Francisco and a couple of bookstore events. And I also welcome anyone to sign up for my newsletter. My most recent newsletter actually was an homage to one of my mentors, Terry Lewis Fisher, on Cagney Lacey. Yeah, and I think coming up, I may be writing a newsletter about podcasts.
Wow.
So stay tuned.
Okay.
Stay tuned on that. Yeah, the opportunity of a podcast to reach out to people and bring new stories to them. And
yeah, it's been very exciting. I like jumping into things that I've not done before and roping my friends into them.
And just the journey we've gone on so far has been just remarkable, and all the people, and women in particular, we've spoken to.
I said to my students, forget this three-dimensional. I mean, it's just like infinite dimension. More you can reveal, and also, don't condemn your villain. You need to write from your villain's point of view. Whoever you consider, villain isn't even a good word; it's too Victorian. But the enemy, whoever the enemy or the other is. And that this theme I'm thinking about for this short story assignment I just got, about how to make the enemy more human, right? Thanks for the time. Thanks for the interest. And I know that this is work ahead of you to finish it. So thank you for that too. Yeah.
It's been so exciting to have you on.
In today's audiography, you can find more about Georgia at georgiajeffries.com. You can find her book, The Younger Girl, at her website or at bookshop.org.
Hey, find out more about Cagney and Lacey at cagneyandlacey.com.
Cagney and Lacey is streaming for free on Roku and Pluto TV. It's available for purchase at YouTube, Apple, and Amazon. And don't forget to check your local library.
Yes. You should be able to find all of these at your local library, although Sisters may be a little bit harder. Sisters, though, is currently streaming on Roku. It's currently streaming on Roku. I did it right.
Yeah, but I was still clapping. I think you have to do it again.
Sisters is currently streaming on Roku for free with ads. And China Beach is also available on Roku. They're having a good time for 80s TV right now.
Good for them. By the way, your voice matters. Now is the time to speak up. Call your representatives and tell them what you think about what is happening. The website 5calls.org makes it easy by helping you contact your reps and gives you starting scripts for what to say.
We love hearing from you guys, our listeners. Please send us messages at our website, 80stvladies.com. That's 80stvladies.com.
We so appreciate your feedback. One way is to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And mention what shows or ladies you want us to cover on 80s TV Ladies. We hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will lead us forward toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century.